Urim and Thummim shew to be made by art, and are the same with the universal spirit, corporate and fixed, by Paracelsus. The truth seems buried, because it brings forth little fruit, but it is great, and prevaileth to make all things manifest so far as is possible for men. For in common sense and reason, all agree in mysteries never, so that we may not speak of science without knowledge, which breaks the gates of brass, and cuts asunder the bars of iron, before the eyes of understanding, that the treasures of darkness may be opened, and the bright and fiery sword discovered, which turns every way to keep transgressors out of paradise. For if we consider wherein the celestial and terrestrial bodies agree, we shall find something objective in the inferior bodies, whereby they communicate their celestial virtue and influence, which present art doth imitate to produce a glorious substance of connex forms, and of clearness, virtue, and beauty beyond expression. The mathematicians say the celestial influences do hold and govern every natural body, and by many unities collect the quantities subsisting without shadow. For the real virtues affect to be specificate, and as living fire gives life to other things, which central substance of celestial virtues or form of metals is the subject of this short discourse. That Urim and Thummim, which were given in the mount, cannot be proved that they are the potential from the creation may appear. For they were substances whose name and essences did predicate each other, being convertible terms, the name and essence one. The words signify light and perfection, knowledge and holiness, also manifestation and truth, even as science and essence make one perfection. It is likely they were before the law given, for the Almighty God commanded Noah to make a clear light in the ark, which some take for a window. Others, for the arching and bowing of the upper deck, a cubit. But sith the text saith, day and night shall no more cease. It seems it did then cease, and whether this were one or more windows is uncertain. But when the windows of heaven were opened, and the air darkened by pouring out rain, the sun not giving his light, but prohibited the generative spirit of the creatures in the ark, what exterior clearness could be expected? Therefore some of the rabbins say the Hebrew word Zohar, which the Chaldee translate nether, is not found in the scripture, but in this place. So that like the word, it seemed to be a rare light, and that which is generally doubted to be, the Creator commanded Noah to make by art. Other Hebrew doctors say it was a precious stone, hanged in the ark, which gave light to all living creatures therein. This the greatest carbuncle could not do, nor any precious stone that is only natural. But the universal spirit, fixed in a transparent body, shines like the sun in glory, and gives sufficient light to all the room to read by. Therefore it is most probable this was the light that God commanded to make, to give light to all living creatures. For it is of perpetual durance. And whereas Tubal-Cain is said to be a perfect master of every artificer in brass and iron, which some hold, doth contain the whole and perfect decoction of the metallic virtue, wherein the central virtue is most abundant, and makes the happy more admired who walk in the midst of the stones of fire, for Isaac. 28.16. Where there are two things of one nature, the chief is to be understood. Therefore, in the mention of fires, pure fire is preferred. The scarlet veil in the temple seemed ever moving, and signified pure fire, generative and fixed in clear bodies, as Urim and Thummim. Although essences are not without great difficulty made manifest in themselves, yet the clear vision thereof makes the possibility unquestionable. As at Elisha's prayer, his servants saw the chariot and horses of fire about his master, which before he saw not. So are they apparent when the invisible is made visible? Some think that Urim and Thummim were not artificial, because they are said in the text to be put in the breastplate, but not to be made. Note. See Exodus 28.30. End note. But this point may be cleared by observing the several kinds of making, as betwixt those things made with hands, and those things that are only made visible by effect. For where natural and habitual virtue do meet together, the perfection is more absolute by a kende of new generation, as the pure sulfur of metal. By an inward power doth purge itself by ebullition, not by the first and remote causes, but by the second and nearer, whereof the philosophers say, the secret of all secrets is of such a disposition, which cannot be perfected with hands, for it is a transmutation of natural things, from one thing to another. Also it is said, the artist takes impure spirits, and by sublimation, nature and art cleanseth them into bodies pure and fixed, so that the bodily nature doth eternally predominate, and being more than perfect, doth give perfection to other things. Now that these perfections have their beginnings from two lights, both the text and the ancient philosophers make plain. But ignorance and the matter of the elements are the iron gates, which must be cut in pieces, before the invisible be made visible. For the natural Urim and Thummim, the philosophers affirm what they have seen and done, and that they did nothing save what they did before and knew, so that a perfect. Knowledge is especially requisite to make a perfect art. Therefore, we are to consider the means to attain to this end. The Lord gave Bezaleel wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Note, see Exod 31:3, and note, these are the means, for gold is dissolved by wisdom, in contrition, affation, and fire. The end is directed to invent works in gold, silver, and brass, which is not to be understood according to the sound of words, but according to the intent of all distillation, to extract the inward part, and manifests the central virtue. For where the perfection of the matter is glorious, the perfection of the form is more glorious. The sun and moon are as the parents of all inferior bodies and things, which come nearest in virtue and temperature, are more excellent. The sun's motion and virtue doth vivify all inferior bodies, and those things which come nearest in virtue and temperature are more excellent. The sun's motion and virtue doth vivify all inferior bodies, and the pure form of the terrestrial sun is said to be all fire. And therefore doth the celestial sun communicate most virtue. Therefore the incorrupted quality of pure sulfur, being digested in external heat, hath also regal power over all inferior bodies, for the sun doth infuse his influence into all things, but especially into gold, and those natural bodies do never shew forth their virtues, till they be made spiritual. One of the rabbins saith, they made in the second temple Urim and Thummim, to the end they might make up all the 8 ornaments, although they did not inquire by them, because the Holy Ghost was not there. And every priest that spake not by the Holy Ghost, and on whom the divine majesty resteth not, they inquire not by him. So it is with sacramental bread, which hath no signification before consecration. But these men had the spirit of Bezaleel, and made these natural spiritual bodies, which sovereign tincture, some say, so purifieth, and causeth the radical humor so to abound, that the children in the 4th generation, yea, as some say, in the 10th, shall perceive the effect of such perfect health of their ancestors. Others say that if they have once finished this art and should live 1,000 years, they might give what they will and when they will, without danger of diminution, as a man that hath fire may give to his neighbor without hurt to himself. Marcus Vaso said there was much more mysteries in the Thummin ceremonies than they understood. Vesta signified pure earth and internal fire, of which it is said, Vesta is earth and fire. Earth undergoeth the name, and so doth fire. Vesta is both. Thus is shewn forth in a work done by fire the mighty Vesta and her pure attire. Philosophy is nothing but the study of wisdom considered in a created nature, as well subject to sense as invisible, and consequently material, and wisdom's central body is the shadow of wisdom's central essence, and the moral interpretation can never exclude the real effects from ocular demonstration. But where reason hath experience, faith hath no merit, and without faith there is no knowledge of any excellent thing, for the end of faith is understanding. The rabbins hold every natural beginning to be either matter or cause of the matter, namely the 4 elements. But here beginnings must be well understood. For there are beginnings of preparations, and beginnings of composition, and beginnings of operation. For the artist was commanded to devise work in gold, that is, from the object to the possibility. For if the matter be glorious, the form must be more glorious, and though the spiritual nature be more operative, yet the bodily nature must predominate eternally, so that to make the corporal spiritual and the spiritual corporal is the whole scope of the intention. Yet the spiritual is not first, but the natural, for corruption must put on incorruption, and mortality immortality. For that which is of greatest durance and most abundant in virtue doth most excel in glory and beauty, and so fittest to make Urim and Thummim, for power and honor and in his sanctuary. But because the greatest things are not done by strength or habit of fingering, as also because the intellect doth so far excel the sense. This is a work of a second intention, and the beginning upon the virtue of elements, that is a pure, bright, and clear water of putrefaction. For the perfection of every art, properly so called, requires a new birth, as that which is sowed is not quickened except it die. But here death is taken for mutation, and not for rotting under the clods. Now, therefore, we must take the key of art, and consider the secret of everything is the life thereof. Life is a vapor, and in vapor is placed the wonder of art. Whatsoever hath heat, agitating and moving in itself by the internal transmutation, is said to live. This life the artist seeks to destroy, and restore an eternal life with glory and beauty. This vapor is called the vegetable spirit, because it is of degree of heat with the hottest vegetable. And being decocted till it shine like brightest steel, you shall see great and marvelous secrets, not by the separation of elements by themselves, but by predomination and victory of that pure fire, which like the celestial sun enters not materially, but by help of elemental fire, sends forth his influence and impression of form. Here we must observe difference of perfections, for although ye have now the fountain of complete white, yet you are not near your chief delight, which is the fountain of life. And center of the heart, the universal spirit, which lives in the radical humidity, and doth naturally vivificate, and is the masculine seed of the celestial sun. Here is that rule made good, except ye sow in gold, ye do nothing. Therefore we must take heed what we understand by gold, whereof there are three sorts, vulgar, chemical, and divine, which is therefore so called, because it is a special gift of God. The Theosophists are persuaded by exact diet, and by certain form of prayers at certain times, to obtain the angel of the sun, to be their guide and director. The philosophers advise to take the like matter above earth, that nature hath made under the earth, others to search the most precious treasure from a vile thing, all which is easily agreed, if rightly understood. For in the lines following, the same author saith, the vile thing is from the sperm of gold, cast in the matrix of Mercury by a prime conjunction. Others affirm Azoth and Jovis to be sufficient for this high perfection, the which Azoth among the Germans is silver, with the Macedonians iron, with the Greeks mercury, with the Hebrews tin, with the Tartars brass, with the Arabians Saturn, and with the Indians gold. All which being diverse in nature are potential in one composition, and by the duel of spirits the celestial gold obtaineth victory over all the rest, and is made, though not with hands, a body shining like the sun in glory, which is called Ionis Omnis Privationis Expers, or Thummin. This is the key that made the pure clear fountain, and of it was made himself. The fair woman so loving the red man, she became one with him, and yielded him all glory, who by his regal power and sovereign quality reigneth over the fourfold nature eternally. But if any shall understand either common or chemical gold to be the substance of this sacred body, he is much mistaken. For a glorious spirit will not appear save in a body of his own kinde. Although pure manché be made of the finest meal, yet wheat is not excluded, and so bread is said to be of the second and nearer causes, rather than the remote. Notwithstanding, that which is made by the effect in a successive course is as certain as that which is made with hands. After we fell from unity, we groan under the burden of division, but three makes up the union, first temporary, and afterwards eternally fixed. He that knoweth a thing fully must know what it was, is, and shall be. So to know the several parts of a successive course is not a small thing, neither the honor little in the right use of the creature. Air turned into water by its proper mixture becomes wood, and the same wood by water is turned into a stone. A spring in Italy called Clytenus makes oxen white that drink it, and the river in Hungary turns iron into copper. What excellency things may attain by habitual virtue, or what power when nature and art make one perfection, who is able to express? If you desire by art to have a thing of admirable sweetness and odor, you will take a substance of like quality. To exalt into such excellency, the proper quality of fire and air is sweetness. It is but appropriate in earth and water. What bodies shall we findy, where these are most abundant, to be wrought upon? As the celestial bodies give no tincture, yet they are most abundant in tincture. Air is cause of life. Mercury is coacted air, ethereal and truly homogeneal, which doth after a sort congeal and fix. It is called a crude gold, and gold affixed and mature mercury. And although the crude quality be cold and dry, and some hold for the excellency of its temperature, that it is all fire, or like to it, whereby it is dissolved. However, it is at large proved those bodies are most abundant in pure fire and air, whose proper quality is sweetness. Therefore those are the fittest subjects to make the most precious perfume in the world, and considering clearness and brightness is the center of each thing. And those bodies have both center and superficies clear and bright, whensoever they are purified by art, and the bodies made spiritual, and those spirits corporated again. They must necessarily be bodies of greatest or clearest light and perfection, as one compareth a glorified body to a clear lanthorn with a taper in it, saying, the more a man excels in virtue, the greater or lesser was the taper. But the work cannot be manifest without the destruction of the exterior form and the restitution of a better, which is the glorious substances of Urim and Thummim, which in their being and physical use preserves the temple of man's body incorruptible. Some observe not just difference between liquefaction and solution, but all corrosives or violent operations nature hates, because there can be no generation but of like natures. Neither can you have the precious sperms without father and mothers. And although one vessel is sufficient to perfect the infant in the womb, yet nature hath provided several breasts to nourish it, and different means to exalt it to the strength of a man. How gold should be burnt, which the fire cannot consume, is questionable, but every exaltation of this sovereign spirit adds a tenfold virtue and power. Then take one part of this spirit, which is become as insensible as dust, and upon molten gold it turns all into powder, which being drunk in white wine, openeth the understanding, increaseth wisdom, and strengtheneth the memory. For here is the vein of understanding, fountain of wisdom, and river of knowledge. The truth of everything is said to be his incorrupted nature, for nothing shall rest eternally visible at the last fire, but that which is of pure virtue and essential purity. Truth in science is not led by chance or fortune, but the Spirit of God guides by the hand of reason. And it seems the prophets esteem of these stones of fire, some meaning the stone of darkness, and as it were, fire turned up; others, the stone of tin. And Ezekiel, the stones of fire attained by wisdom, which he differeth from the natural precious stones, as pure fire from common fire. Therefore let modesty allow that possible, whereof he understands not the termination and degrees, neither refuse the waters of Shiloah, because they go slowly, for they that wade in deep waters cannot go fast. To obtain the treasures of nature, you must follow nature only, who gives not the like time to every generation. Nudie. See Isaiah 8:6, and note, but as the mare hath 10 months, the elephant 3, or as some say, 9 years and 50, before conjunction. Be patient therefore in a work of nature, for thereunto only is promised victory, and the chief errors in art are haste and dullness. The regeneration of man and the purification of metals have like degrees of preparation and operation to their highest perfection. The first beginnings of transmutation or natu ration is the smallest measure of pure sulfur, with both riches and honor in the left hand, and length in the right. In natural generations the form prepares the matter, yet there are precedent preparations. The beginnings of transmutation must be distinguished. Some are begun of preparation, and some are begun of composition. Beginnings of preparation, in the well of tears, doth qualify the coldness and dullness of the crude disposition, and tame and subdue the fearful quality of swift flying, and changeth the color of this eternal liquor, turning the inside outward, and adding heat by the internal sulfur of the homogeneal body, which is by means of change of water, because water by water can only be extracted. Yet it is excluded in the conclusion, for though it be a necessary preparation to the alteration following, yet is but the servile and passive, which hath the first operation, being preserved unhurt in weight and purity. Beginnings of composition are those inward operations and changes, that follow after that scalding deluge, which by mixing with fixed sulfur doth dissolve the stubbornness of this urn. And by help of the external heat, the internal sulfur is excited by operation, and purifieth the substance, but only to a pale whiteness, more hurtful than profitable to the body of man. What these are shall afterwards appear. Again, sulfur must be distinguished. White sulfur and living or reviving sulfur. White sulfur is of like operation, and is perfected by restraining, and healeth almost all diseases, and tingeth to white ad infinitum. By knowledge hereof, even mere natural men have believed the resurrection, become sober, temperate, and patient, not doubting. Within the center of complete white rests the red stone of most delight. This hath caused men justly to condemn all. Again, sulfur must be distinguished, white sulfur and living or reviving sulfur. White sulfur is of like operation, and is perfected by restraining, and healeth almost all diseases, and tingeth to white ad infinitum. By knowledge hereof, even mere natural men have believed the resurrection, become sober, temperate, and patient, not doubting. Within the center of complete white rests the red stone of most delight. This hath caused men justly to condemn all cementations, calcinations, and citrinations, being enlightened with the glorious object, which is as clear as a crystal-looking glass. Reviving sulfur is the secret of secrets, and the glory of the whole world, and only proper to such whom the Creator hath apted by way of natural disposition. For they do not only mortify, but purify a pure body, quickening it with the same essential form, and are said to make a spiritual body, because there is no corruption to resist the spirit. But the bodily nature, being wholly subject, is, with the spirit, eternally fixed in a transparent body shining as the sun. Therefore the conclusion must be understood of the second, and not of the first. For though a man have never so much white sulfur, if he have not of this reviving sulfur, he is as far from the precious spirit, which hath power over all inferior bodies, as any other. For only that which is of the nature of the sun shall shine like the sun in glory. A synod of philosophers adviseth us, in seeking the treasures of health and riches, we should shew affections to justice and prudence. Like Solomon, asking wisdom, riches were given to him as advantage. Let us search therefore celestial virtue, which is the center of all things, so will it be easy to manifest the sovereign spirit of health and riches. For the vegetable sulfur is the first mover in nature, and only the mercurial nature hath power of metallical life and death. Crude mercury is originally a vapor from clear water and air of most strong composition coacted, or air itself, with a mercurial spirit by nature flying. Ethereal and homogeneal, having the spirits of heat and cold, and by exterior and interior heres, doth congeal and fix. Also gold is a fixed fire or mature mercury, and may be made more volative than mercury, but only by divers mercuries made. Of mercury is nature set on work, the fixed body loosed, the vegetable sulfur created, and the universal spirit fixed. For the authority of the ancient writers, divine and natural reasons assure us this and know. Other is the true course to manifest those lights, wherein the Creator hath heaped up virtue and power. But it's objected, the philosophers do not agree amongst themselves. Answer: instruments of divers strings make sweet harmony, if they be well tuned. But the readers do rather seek to overrule them, than by painful industry to findy them consent. Objection. Affirm contraries. Ans W. The artist, his intention is to agree contraries. Object. They exclude gold and mercury from the creation of the stone. Ans W. Because their crude matter is from the destruction of the exterior form. Object. They say the virtue of elements is their materials. Ans W. Right in respect of their beginnings upon pure bodies. Object. All their secrets spring from one vile thing common to rich and poor. Ans W. Precious things corrupted are most vile, and science is common to rich and poor, and hath much use of calcination or dust. Object. No metal is required to the making of the stone. Ans W. As no part of man to the making of man. Object. One thing, one glass, one furnace is sufficient. Ans W. True, when two things of one kende are apted and conjoined. Object. Out of one root proceeds white and red. Ans W. Even as male and female from one womb. Object. The stone is vegetable, animal, and mineral. Ans W. Right, joint, and several it is said to be vegetable because in the maturation it is multiplied in virtue and quantity. It is said to be animal because it increaseth his own kende, and is said to be mineral because his original is from metal or the mineral. Here we may remember the Bishop of Utrecht, who lost his life for discovering his secret. Why should we prevent the highest distribution, who hath not made knowledge hereditary, but wrapped things in secret? That we might difference things in being, and in being and use. Nature is even jealous of her supremacy, and abhorreth to see the sensible before the intellectual treasures preferred. This shews the beginning and end of art. Luxata est justo cum rectis animo latitia. Mark what ye sow, for such is your harvest. Light is sown on pure earth, and some grain begins to put forth ears at 3 joints, some at 4. But the ear never buds until the joints be grown. And what virtue this nodding or fixing gives, consider. For by meditation you may see, by seeing you may know, by knowing ye delight, by delighting ye adhere, by adhering ye possess. By possessing ye enjoy the truth, that is, the incorrupted use made visible. Therefore take heed how ye value. 4. Part of these things thy mende may prompt thee to, and part thy better part may teach thee how to do. The making of Urim and Thummim, and the perfection of the elixir is aptly compared to the fourfold creation of Menkindi, Adam from earth, Eve from Adam, Abel from both, and Jesus Christ from a virgin. So man called a living stone, produceth that eternally stony and fiery conquering spirit called the elixir, from their proper earth only, their Adam from their Eve, from both their Virgo, from her only the sovereign and universal spirit, which doth vivify and preserve all living creatures, and raiseth the artist from the dust to sit among princes. Life without sin is wisdom manifest in the flesh. A body without shadow is the universal spirit corporate. Urim and Thummim were holy signs within the breastplate to inquire of God in the temple. Natural Urim and Thummim is a visible quality in a clear body which preserveth the temple of man's body incorruptible. Is it not prophetical that all men shall wisely consider the works of God, to the end they may know how to value them rightly, and to make just difference between corporal and spiritual things and corporate spirits? Note, see Psalm 64.9 and Psalm 111.8. End note. For although spirits possess no place, yet they fail not to fill every part by contact of their virtue, and in the use alters both quality and quantity. The perfect and distinct knowledge whereof doth necessarily manifest the things sought after by the proper and appropriate qualities. And from the causes to the effect openeth the internal beauty of a true and natural essence as plainly as by seeing that ye see. And also sheweth the terminate, privative, and perfect end of every particular act, which is the richest of intellectual treasures, because science and essence are one, and where the several works and successive are apparent, the time need not be limited, like the men of. Epithulia. For only at Elisha's prayer his servant's eyes were open to see invisible things, which all that rise to glory shall do. It was held of old, nothing deserves the love of an honest man, save the internal beauty. Therefore they held love or natural affection to be the first cause or motion. Like as the heat and virtue of the sun and of the whole heavens hath power in all things created under heaven, and by their influence and radiation all things increase, grow, live, and are conserved. And by their recess they mourn and wither, fall and droop, yet they do not necessitate any, all their force being most in imperfect things. For a body of equal temper receives little alteration from the constellations, because the earth received virtue before the heavens were adorned with sun, moon, and stars. Therefore that is to be distinguished in reason, so is distant in place, and different things in being, and in being in use. For change of quality brought confusion, and a better change renovation. Historians affirm the river Nilus vaporeth not by reason of the long decoction under the sun, yet is the water most wholesome and medicinable. And the neighbor earth begins to increase in weight the 17th of June, and not before, even then when the river begins to rise. Which sympathy of the distant water and earth by the power of heaven is not against nature, although beyond ordinary reach. Therefore for a leading cast, let us observe the concord of metallical bodies, which, like the first male and female, have not several beginnings, but are all from a sulphurous vapor, which, by help of influence, instrument, digestion, and masculine and feminine virtue, connecting proper and appropriate qualities, they obtain their perfection by the power of God's ordinance. Yet as every earth yields not like metal, so every metal yields not like central virtue. Therefore, according to that creating command, everything should increase in its proper kinde, not in diverse, and time makes the number infinite. The ancients reading the great volume of the Book of Nature finde no abridgment to assimilate the majesty of nature, save man and the stone, both which are called living stones, whose original mortification, purification, and difficult exaltation are of infinite virtue. Then observe also a celestial and terrestrial sun, which they parallel with man, which because they only are capable of true temper, which is certainly possible, although seldom enjoyed. But to gain this precious treasure of life and health, we must make sufficient provision, like men that do deal with great persons. For gold is lord of stones, and noblest of metals, and by his proper regiment doth multiply himself infinitely. Therefore Geber in his book of denudation saith in gold are 10 parts heat, 10 parts humidity, 10 parts siccity, which triple perfection makes an absolute unity, body, soul, and spirit being eternally vivified, because unity is a generical quality of all that is one, and is an effect of the form which doth produce it. For of all kinde of governments, 10 is the most perfect. And for the natural substance, no composition is like to gold, for it is a most perfect. Temper and equal miction, the miracle of nature, a celestial star, a terrestrial sun, the fountain of life, the center of the heart, the secret virtue of all celestial and terrestrial bodies, the masculine and universal seed. First and most powerful of the sulphurous nature, the great secret of the Almighty Creator. It hath most form and entity, so most virtue and operation. In it the elements are elementized. It is called sulphur, and sulphur fire. Yea, it is said to be all fire, or like to that in which it is dissolved. And as light is the center of heaven, and soul of the world, so brightness is the center, and celestial virtue, the form of gold, whose admired miction nothing merely natural can dissolve, nor anything artificial, except it agree with it in matter and form, and do remain with it in the reconciliation. This virtual influence enters potentially, and dwells in the radical humidity, and no other thing, whether from heaven or earth, doth nourish the heart. Yet it is not visible, before virtue be matched, for there is best concord where it is most abundant. But whither shall we mount to match this miracle of nature? The historians tell us of an eternal liquor of most strong coaction, rained down from heaven. Here is like descent. She is called Hyperion, or daughter of the sun, a body of like weight and virtue with gold, fair, clear, quick, only roasted and brought from the empire of humidity to suit the person. which in her crude nature shews strong affection, and turns the noblest of metals into her own color. Therefore the artist studies how to dispensate these two. And first denudateth the lady of her frosty garments, that she may have the first activity, and liquefy her fettered lord. Then are they both in the power of art to better. It is objected this heaven-born Hermodactylus or Hydromel is of a nature so obstinate and incorrect, she will by no means receive the best impression. Consider her name signify, mixed matter of contrary quality, therefore may be separated, and although her original obscure condition, because it is unknown by the innate affections and subsistence. For it is an airy body, or air itself with mercurial spirit, subsisting of internal heat and external cold. Others say, it is composed of the spirit of the world, corporate in the womb of the earth, and apt to receive the qualities and properties of all natural things, as wax impression. And being composed of spirits, the weight is of greater wonder. Others say, it is a crude sperm not sufficiently decocted, yet not to be profaned. Others call it an immature gold, which kills itself, and the father and the mother, to bring forth a pure infant. By her they overcome the fire. She is the perfection of the universal medicine. What conformity, what similitude, what identity she holds with the metallical urn, being the original matter and substance thereof, and may be coagulated to the equal temper of gold, is as the whiteness in snow. Therefore the ancients magnify the most blessed, who created such a substance, and gave it such properties as no other thing in nature doth possess. Yet we see it is a vicious matter which hath superfluous humidity, proper and appropriate qualities, separable and inseparable accidents. Therefore the separable may be removed, to which end she is included in a well of tears, that the wateriness may be vapored, or through long decoction by dryness vanquished. Then doth it, as it were, congeal and fix, and become more apt for durance and extension. For whatsoever is contrary to the natural doth debilitate, and like by his like is nourished. But heat is contrary to cold, and the natural property of scalding heat is to weaken and dry. The fresh water adds power and heat. Heat augmented becomes fire, and time turns strength to corruption. This glutinous substance hath natural heat, from which is the life and death of the elements. Therefore, as common fire bringeth all things to his own nature, so the external working upon the internal heat, it doth necessarily obtain victory. Therefore, if you can believe that heat and dryness shall overcome cold and moisture, that lineary and successive course, hidden to all the therefore, as nature delights in conquered, so the lovers and searchers into nature's work must be of constant minds and Gideon-like resolve to raise the city morose, not refusing to assist the public good. And then the marriage. For the princess never unmasks her virgin beauty, except to him that hath skill and power to espouse her in a bed of love, which none can do. Before the despoilation of the exterior form, but the obstacles removed, and nature set on work, the external decree doth necessitate the effect. For being now warm and blithe, and apt for new generation, and pounded with her lord, grated to dust, his unnatural softness deceives the sense, and they passionately condole each other's exile. And in their embraces fall in a sound, until their dissolved bodies shew corruption, and the more pure, being corrupted, are more vile. The artist, finding them out of their Indian paradise, corrects their central virtue, and raising them from the earth, leads them the thorny path to threefold happiness, and by fiery trial purifieth the quantity, and changeth the quality, and so brings them to perfect rest, whereby they have power over the bodies of men and metals, and are crowned in token of their dignity and boundless territories. Now considering the rarity of true knowledge, the honor and dignity of things desired, what spirit is so ignoble to think much either of cost or time, when that which is sought is of all terrestrial treasure most excellent? Finis.